one of the things that a lot of people don't really know about the pyramid is that the official narrative is that the pyramids were built as tombs, but we've never found a mummy in any of the Great Pyramids of Giza, those three pyramids. To my knowledge, some people say that pyramids have been found in, or like mummies have been found in other pyramids, like throughout Egypt. But a lot of those pyramids are copycat pyramids that were built far after the Great Pyramid. And the crazy thing about the Great Pyramid is that, and the two ones surrounding it, is that those are the original pyramids, but there's hundreds of pyramids in Egypt. Yeah. Most of them were built hundreds, if not thousands of years later, and most of them have crumbled to time. You know, they are no longer standing. They're nowhere near as architecturally sound. And the pyramid itself, you know, they're withstanding the test of time. By the way, when you look into just the measurements of how large the pyramid is, it's kind of mind-blowing, but it's also mind-blowing to realize that the stones are not held in place with any mortar or concrete or anything. They are held in place literally using just their own weight, and they've, using nothing but their own weight, withstood the test of thousands of years. The original narrative is that, you know, they were built in 4500 BC by the pharaoh Khufu, right? And the Sphinx was theoretically built after that to guard the Great Pyramid. The Sphinx was theoretically built by the son of Khufu, Khafre, right? Yeah. And so we all know about, I'm not sure if your viewers know, but I'm sure that you've probably heard of Robert Schoch and John Anthony West, and their research around the Sphinx being, you know, much older than just 4,000 years.
And what did they say what the alleged use case was for it?
They said that first off, they said the Sphinx was just erected to protect the pyramids. It was like a symbolism.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And so it was built by the son, and then the son also apparently built one of the smaller pyramids of the three that are the Great Pyramids, right? So the son said that he was put in one of the tombs. The father was put in the Great Pyramid, but no mummies have been found in any of these pyramids. In fact, unlike pretty much anywhere else in Egypt, there's not even been hieroglyphs found inside of the Great Pyramid. And most people don't know that. And the only reason we think that the Great Pyramid was once the tomb of Khufu was because his name was written on the walls inside the Great Pyramid, but it wasn't inscribed like regular hieroglyphs. It was painted with red paint. Who knows when that red paint was put there? Because it wasn't carved into the walls, so we know for a fact it wasn't put there at the time that it was built. Right. So was it put there right after, or potentially hundreds, if not thousands of years later, by someone who's writing graffiti on the walls? You know, and for me, like, if I go and tag the side of your fucking apartment building, does that mean I fucking built it?
No.
Exactly. So, for all we know, Khufu might have found the pyramid and put his name on the walls, right? And so
that's possible.
That's where a lot of people, you know, and there's also the idea that maybe the Sphinx itself was once a lion and it was carved down to the head because the head is not proportional to the rest of the body, right? And so we definitely know it was carved down from something, especially looking at the erosion patterns.
Who would have carved it down? Khufu or Khafre?
The son. So
Khafre.
We might be getting these names mixed up
Khufu's
back and forth, but I think it's Khafre. Khafre is the Sphinx.
Yeah,
Khufu is
let's
the
check
pyramid.
Don't trust me on that.
Yeah. But again, like if they found it and the Sphinx really is older than them by thousands of years, 6,000 years potentially or longer, then maybe he's the one who recarved the head to make it more of a pharaoh like himself.
But yeah, you got it right, by the way. Khafre was the son of King Khufu.
Got it.
So we're good.
But that's the other thing, and this kind of ties into the Sphinx, why the Sphinx is so mysterious, because when they were studying the geometry of the face of the Sphinx, one, the two sides are perfectly symmetrical. Most faces have a little bit of imbalance in the face of people. Like most people's faces are not perfectly symmetrical, right? And so there have been statues found of the actual coffre. And they've compared the faces, and most notably, they compared like line angles between like what is the angle from the eye to the edge of the lips, or like from the tip of the nose to the chin, and those types of angles. And you see that the face of the Sphinx is distinctly got more pronounced jaw. Like the angle's a lot steeper on the Sphinx, right, than what Khafre's other statues reflect. And they showed the pictures of these angles actually in a newspaper decades ago. Kind of like when I think it was when they were like studying the Sphinx with John Anthony West and all this. So it might have been the 80s or the 90s. But a dentist from, I believe it might have been like Brooklyn or something.
It's a bad start.
Yeah. But a dentist from somewhere, I believe it was in the New York area, saw the pictures and the line angles of the face or whatever. And he goes, I can tell you, as I think he was an orthodontist, he goes, that jaw and that jawbone looks distinctly African American. Like it looks African. And so that's why a lot of people don't like, especially the Egyptians, don't like the narrative that the Sphinx was not built by them, because, and this is why someone like, there's so many names that we've said today. People like John Anthony West and Graham Hancock, they've been called like racist by the Egyptian government, right? Why is it? Because if what they're saying is true, then they believe it's racist to claim that, hey, maybe whoever carved the head of the Sphinx was African, and not Egyptian.
Is there a way? All right, this is a
even
weird.
Though Egypt is in Africa.
Yeah. Like they're basically what they're saying is that they're trying to say that someone of a different race on the African continent than what we know is the Egyptian race now. So, olive skin, whatever, would have carved this. Okay, I got that. Is there this is way above my pay grade now, but because I'm going back to like where Khufu is, but also in my mind, I'm going back to where Hancock and John Anthony West may be. And I don't offhand remember if they have year estimations on it. I think they do, but I don't want to say that for sure. Is it possible that what they're claiming, though, would descend to people who lived in Egypt at the time, and that's what they look like, as opposed to what they have, I don't know, evolved to in features now? Is that possible?
Yeah, I guess that's totally possible, which makes you wonder, why is the Egyptian government so adamant about covering up anything that contradicts their narrative? And their narrative is heavily guarded, right? Like anything that's contradictory evidence, they immediately suppress it. And that's like the whole thing with
Zahi
Hawass, who I believe is no longer like in that position. I think he actually got caught like stealing artifacts and selling them on the black market.
Oh, did he? Can we Google that? Zahi Hawass thief.
Like I think he definitely got fired by the Egyptian government, but
he's such an asshole, that guy.
Yeah.
You see anything? Former Egyptian this is 2014. Former Egyptian antiquities minister faces questions over theft from pyramid. You know what? Didn't Matt talk about this? Maybe that was off camera. I think Matt might have talked about this. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. There's also, I'm trying to remember all this because Matt is a million miles a minute. I mean, that guy's forgotten more in the last 5 minutes than I know about this in my whole life. But like, he showed me pictures, I think on episode 153. We did 153 and 154 together. I think it was 153. He showed me pictures, maybe in the second hour there, of the Sphinx. And there's like a hole in the head or something. And Zahi Hawass was part of the people who was trying to say, no, that's not there. And like wouldn't let people look at this.
Yeah.
Does that sound familiar?
There's multiple holes in the Sphinx that go into the Sphinx. And this is kind of a big, I guess, conspiracy around Zahi, where he's flipped his narrative multiple times on camera. There's no cavities in the Sphinx. There are cavities in the Sphinx, and I've personally gone through them. I've gone into the Sphinx. You're going to see it, and it's going to be the most amazing experience ever. And then now he's back to denying it altogether. Like, his levels of enthusiasm on camera about the cavities in the Sphinx have changed. And right now he's obviously in full denial mode and has been basically ever since he banned John Anthony West and all them. But that was like a big thing. And this is also missing footage that's out there footage of him literally on like ABC with like a camera or something. He's like, we're going to go into a room that's under the Sphinx and you're going to see it with me for the first time ever. And then they go down there and basically he was like, Indiana Jones could only dream of being here, right? This footage has been talked about many times. I've not seen the footage, but apparently it exists. And now anything he says on camera is there's nothing under the Sphinx. Any of those cavities on top, they were put there by grave diggers many years later. There's nothing in there. There's not even worth looking into.
Changing the tune completely.
Yeah.
Conspiracy brain starts tingling when you hear that, for sure. I just that whole dynamic's weird. Like if you've seen the video with him, it's a pretty famous video now with him and Graham Hancock where he won't even talk with him. When someone won't even talk with someone and they're not like a fucking neo-Nazi or something like that, it tells me they're afraid of what might happen. It doesn't even tell me, and it may tell other people this, and I understand it would be fair for you to think this. It doesn't even tell me they're all wrong. It tells me they're worried about something they're wrong about, right? But a lot of people out there are going to be like, yo, fuck that. That guy probably doesn't believe anything he's saying because he won't even debate it with people. But, you know, it definitely goes deeper than that, too, because you don't know what types of narratives governments may know about that could shape people's meaning of life, like existence questions again. You know, and that's why when you look at the pyramids are so fascinating to me now. They weren't when I was younger. I just was like, oh, cool. Like I went there actually when I was maybe like 16. I thought it was the coolest shit ever. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, let's go. You know, there was no thought on like, oh, what might happen here. But you look at it, it's pretty.
I'll be banned from Egypt for saying this online probably. But my dream is to like take a bunch of mushrooms inside the Great Pyramid. Like
you should do that.
Imagine that experience, bro.
Yeah.
Play some just fucking gong music or something. Like just get some sound waves going through there, bro. Talk about a trip.
I'm trying to remember though, because like I'm pretty sure we went inside it, right? Because they take tours through there. You see that, but. Have they ever released a full layout of what they claim is the layout of the inside? Because they don't take people everywhere on the inside, I don't think, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can Google the layout. There's essentially 3 main rooms and a handful of shafts coming out of each room. And they think a lot of these are like ventilation shafts. But then it was recently discovered, and actually, again, Zahi Hawass banned the guy who discovered this, but
of course
one of the shafts in the Queen's chamber, they thought opened up out to the outside as a ventilation shaft, but they sent like this tiny robot down it, and they got to the end of what they thought was like a 10-foot shaft that just kind of ended at a dead end in the wall because they couldn't see beyond that, right? But they realized it actually ramped up at like a 40-degree angle. And so this robot is seeing with a live feed on a monitor like this in the 90s for the first time, this unexplored shaft, right? In the Queen's chamber, as sexual as that sounds. And, at the end of this shaft, which was very, very long, they discover a door. And the door has copper handles in it. And the crazy thing about these copper handles, and they know it's a door because it's just a dead end in this long shaft that has like edges around it with these copper handles. So it clearly looks like a door. It's currently today, if you want to Google, it's called Gattenbrink's door.
Gattenbrink's door.
It's a German last name, Gattenbrink.
You don't say.
He was a German scientist who was studying this shaft. So that's what it looked like. And the crazy thing about those copper handles is metal has been found nowhere else inside the Great Pyramid as far as being involved in the construction of it. So this is the only place that metal's been found.
Could that have been put there later?
That's the big question, you know? And so when they found it, basically Zahi Hawass took responsibility or tried to take responsibility for the find, and he teamed up with Gattenbrink they were like, we're going to find out what's behind the door. And there's videos of him saying this. And then he completely flipped his situation. And this is before this is right around the time of the whole Sphinx issue as well. And because it's in the mid 90s. And he basically was like, he banned Gattenbrink from ever researching the pyramid ever again with his team. And
Banned him from Egypt, period.
I don't know about Egypt, but he definitely banned him from researching the pyramid. And basically is denying that there's anything behind the door.
So weird.
But if you look it up, you see those red paintings in the middle of the screen, right next to that picture.
Yeah.
So in the years since, they have explored what's behind that door. And this is also kind of interesting. I'm not sure how it relates to what I was telling you earlier about red paint with Khafre's name, taking ownership, claiming that he built the pyramid. Behind the door was another door just like it. So they took a little tiny camera that they squeezed beyond the edges of this stone, and they looked behind it, and it was like another section of the shaft with another door with copper handles. They eventually got behind that, and those pictures, that collection of pictures, is what they saw behind that second door, and it was just basically like a small room with like red hieroglyphs inside of it. And the red hieroglyphs, from my knowledge, just translates to like random numbers, which they think are like measurements of something. So they think it was probably put there by whoever built the pyramid to like measure things out. But the weird thing about that narrative, again, like Zahi aside, the weird thing about it is, I mean, there's so much weird about it. Like, there's nothing that was unintentionally done in the pyramid. So how can you explain this random shaft with this random door with these random measurements as like the one thing that's accidental, or like the one flaw in the construction of like there's nothing done unintentionally about it. So why would I think that this was just kind of haphazardly there and just like, oh, they forgot to finish the basement real quick? You know what I'm saying?
It gets weird.
Yeah.
It's also the thing that blows my mind about it, though, to take it a step farther on what we're talking about, and I don't want to like get us off topic with this, but it's in the same wavelength, is when you look at all these different structures that aren't as magnificent as the Great Pyramid at Giza, but all these different pyramid structures that exist around the world. And then you look at the history we know, and we think about how much different all these cultures were, yet they all came up with that. And like it gets a little dangerous because you can get to like where, you know, Crazy Guy on Ancient Aliens got to with some of this stuff, like it's all aliens, the Mayans, you know, whatever. But, you know, I do wonder about how ancient, I won't even say technology, like let's stop short of that for a minute and just say ancient architecture like this was shared. I've heard people argue, like literal commenters out there, and I look at this and go, oh, that's interesting, saying like, oh, all you needed was a couple guys who made it across the sea and said, hey, here's how we built this thing. I guess technically they're right about that.
Yeah.
But it's pretty fascinating that we see this pop up in South America, in Asia, even I think, and other different places. No.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the many aspects that makes this phenomenon like really weird. It's like a whole phenomenon in itself that around the world are ancient megalithic structures that defy explanation by modern day technology standards. And many of these are being dated to dates that we didn't know advanced humans existed back then, right? Like 10,000 years ago completely rewrites history if that's true about the pyramid or whatever, right? Or longer. Like it could very well be 20,000 years, right? But even John Anthony West and those guys have said many times that they dialed back some of their estimations just because they didn't want to sound too crazy,
right?
You know. And so, yeah, as far as some of this stuff being found in other places, I think it's very mysterious. Like we were talking last night about a video that I'm working on currently, which is about Puma Punku. And Puma Punku is in South America, and it's got all these like megalithic stones that are even bigger than some of the stones that are in the pyramid. Like some of these stones in Puma Punku, which seem to be precision cut with lasers, just looking at the geometry of all of these stones. those are being dated back to 15,000 BC. And it shows similarities in like some of the methods used to join some of these stones together, specifically one that they call the keystone cut. The keystone cut, what they would basically do is like cut a keystone shape into the joint between these stones, and they would pour bronze, like smelted bronze or whatever, into it, and it would dry, and it would basically lock these two stones together.
Luke Caverns has talked about this with me. I believe that was on camera in episode 175. I'm pretty sure, but yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. And so the ultimate point I want to make here is so that's what a keystone cut looks like. The fact that keystone cuts that were used to melt bronze and use that as poured into the cut to join the stones raises so many questions, just like any aspect of the Great Pyramid or any other stuff that you found. One question: why are these keystone cuts found as a method found commonly in many different ancient megalithic sites that are currently being debated? Clearly that means, and these are sites across the world, clearly that means that either the civilization was the same or the teachers of the civilization were the same, right? And the teachers of the civilization is an interesting idea, because even the civilization in Bolivia, South America, where Pumapunku is located, even they don't take credit for this ancient site, which mainstream archaeologists say was built in like 1000 AD by the Tiwanaku culture, right, who were essentially Stone Age people. Yes, they had a lot of advancements in like agriculture and what you can assume was maybe civilization, but we're only saying that because of the amazing site that is the Tiwanaku temple complex and Pumapunku, and we're attributing it to that society. And that kind of led to the current civilization there today. I believe it was the Andeans.
Don't look at me.
Yeah. I only looked at you because you recently had a South America guy on.
That was a few months ago. That's a big expectation, all the terms being in there.
So that culture, even they don't claim responsibility for building it. The mainstream archaeologists say that you did it, but they don't take responsibility for it. They claim that their god Viracocha did it, and Viracocha in their mythology was this god who they say is the creator of the world. So they say he came out of Lake Titicaca. Yes, it's actually called Titicaca.
Yeah.
And
I knew that one.
And he came and erected, essentially with his followers, the Pumapunku site overnight in one night. And they also built the Tiwanaku complex, which has a lot of interesting aspects to the stones in Tiwanaku, which is a quarter mile north of Pumapunku. But many of the carvings and inscriptions done at Tiwanaku, they say were put there after the fact, because there's a lot of like symbology of Viracocha and all of his like followers building, things and stuff. And but they say that the Tiwanaku culture engraved into flat stones that were laser cut perfectly they came upon, right? So the fact that they say that is like it opens more questions than answers anything, right? And why is the government like trying to say that the Tiwanaku culture did it? There's even been people like Brian Forrester, someone who's like on a podcast circuit or whatever. He goes to Pumapunku like every year or two, and he's made note, like if you watch his YouTube channel videos throughout the last 15 years of him documenting each time, he goes, when I was here 2 years ago, this ground was a little bit lower, which means that these stones have been covered up even more by about 2 feet of dirt. Why are they covering it up? Because last time I was here, they were digging under it to see what was under it. So there's a lot of even stuff that's still buried and stuff that has been excavated and reburied at Pumapunku. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I kind of wonder if some of this, I don't want to like explain it away too basically, but if some of the quote unquote covering up is less, having to do with, I'm trying to think of how I want to say this, like government power over the people or something like that, versus having some sort of religious catastrophe because the major world religions have a belief of a certain age, if you will, of humanity on this planet that, again, there can be truth to some of these religious texts. I don't know, but they get really uptight if you question the timeline. And I've had people in here like Elizabeth Weiss who will tell you straight up, like, yes, there's evidence to say, and I won't say the terms because I'll fuck it up, but there's evidence to say that Homo erectus or whatever, so there is a term, split onto some other form of it at 100,000 years ago or something like that. I've had other people in here, maybe with less qualifications than Elizabeth scientifically, talk about that as well. And so when you see timelines like the one presented saying, it was built in 1000 AD by the Andeans or whatever, if suddenly you told people, well, I'm sorry, everybody, we fucked that up. It's actually like built in 30,000 BC. Now you get people, flipping through their Quran, flipping through their Bible, their Torah, whatever, like, wait a minute, that can't be right.
Yeah.
And does that cause a problem? I don't know if that's the case, but maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. And I think the ultimate question that a lot of these ancient structures kind of lead to is like, okay, is there a lost type of technology here that we weren't aware that they had, based off of what we think that they had? These are people that supposedly were carving stones with copper chisels and tools and whatnot, but
yeah, good luck with that.
Exactly. Right. A lot of these stones are so precision cut, especially Puma Punku, bro, like sharp edges, like laser precision flatness, and a lot of these stones it's actually called andesite. It's an extremely hard stone. It's volcanic. And the idea that they were carving those stones and even drilling precise holes at precise measurements to precise depths that are perfectly smooth can't be done with chicken bones and bronze tools, So what ultimately comes down to is like, okay, what does this ultimately mean? Does this mean that civilization was advanced and there was like an ancient cataclysm, or does it mean that they were built by aliens? I think aliens, again, it's easy to jump to that because aliens seems to be a easy cop out for a lot of conspiracies, right? But I don't know. I would like to think that maybe civilization was very advanced and something wiped it out. I think that's kind of the side I'm leaning towards.
And that's another problem too when you look at the different historian dialogues where people can't even agree, or not even like agree, like people will shut people down based on talking about like some of the extinctions on the planet over time. Be like, well, no, there wasn't really something then or there. Like, I can't keep track of all of it because I'm not in the scientific community, but I hear the noise, whether it be on podcasts or you hear about people even fighting about it on the news when you read some of these stories that we've brought up today. But, I think I brought this up with Elizabeth Weiss. It's kind of wild if you think about whenever some of these extinctions may have happened, you needed whatever it was, 50 people, whatever it might have been, to survive. So if you go back to it, you think about the fact that, let's say, I'll make one up right now, 25,000 years ago, there's some extinction, and 50 people survived from what was maybe a pretty advanced civilization. Not saying they had iPhones or something like that, but they accomplished some crazy shit. Whole world burns, whatever it is. These people come out from under their rock. Oh, okay, we're going to start humanity again. They start fucking, having kids, and the kids don't have any of that experience, and those people die with most of that knowledge. The little bit that maybe they're able to pass on that somehow makes its way through the ranks builds the next society. But that stuff, when I start thinking about it, that actually gets like biblical to me. That's like, whoa.
Dude, one of the things that always makes me question even the ancient advanced civilization hypothesis, which, if this has any merit to it, and I'll tell you kind of what my thought of it is, if it has any merit to it, then it could lean more towards the aliens side of things, right? But if humanity once got to a point thousands of years ago where it was that advanced, one thing I can say about our generation of people is that the more advanced we've got, the more shit we've put in space. Why are there no ancient advanced satellites? You know what I'm saying? Why have we never found any of that shit? Or have they found that shit and we just don't hear about it?
Possible. I'm not looking up there. I don't have that. But that's a good question, and that's like, correct me if I'm wrong because I haven't seen all of it. Did Ancient Aliens try to talk about some of that? Like there's some shit in space, or did I just make that up?
I mean, Ancient Aliens has probably hit on every aspect of the UFO
Yeah.
phenomenon possible. I know one thing that is interesting, and I actually have a video about this, but it's the whole moon of Mars. And the angle of that video was why.
I haven't seen that video. Let's talk about that.
Okay, so yeah, this is interesting. So essentially, one of the things that Buzz Aldrin, the guy who you guys said you interviewed, the guy who he punched in the face.
Alessi was on his podcast
Right.
interview. Who was that? What was that guy's name, Alessi?
Bart Sibrel.
So he punched Buzz Aldrin punched him in the face for
Yeah.
questioning the moon landing?
Because what happened was he literally just like point blank journalism ran in front of him and had a Bible, and he's like, swear on the Bible that you made it to the moon. He just like out of like, and there's like press and they're in a hotel and everything.
Yeah.
And Buzz Aldrin's like, leave me alone or whatever, and then he just like clocked him.
in the face.
Yeah.
Honestly, good for Buzz.
Yeah.
Anyway, continue.
Yeah. So Buzz was on, it was like C-SPAN or some like news program, probably around that time in the 80s or 90s. And he was like, we need to go to the stars. We need to go to beyond Mars and to the other planets. And he's like, and little do people know, but there's a little potato-shaped moon around Mars that circles Mars once every 7 hours. And on this little potato-shaped object, there's a giant monolith there. And when people see that, they're going to go, who put that there? Who put that there? This is my impression of Buzz
I can
Aldrin.
tell. It's a
Right.
pretty good one.
And literally, if you look it up, you can Google monolith on Phobos. It's the name of the moon.
Phobos or PH?
Phobos. Look up this monolith. It is ginormous. So the picture that you're seeing, it's clearly got like right angles, and it's a very tall shadow that has like sharp edges. That one down, second one down right there. Yeah, click on that. So that's like it at 3 different zooms. And the fact that you're seeing that means that it's probably several miles tall. You know what I'm saying? From space. So that's the monolith he's referring
face-looking
to.
thing?
That's the face on Mars. Where? One picture over.
The one that looks like up, left.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I missed that one.
That's the one that's NASA has claimed they've debunked many times. So have you never seen that photo?
I don't think so. No.
So there's a NASA photo of
So funny. People expect when they walk in here, like, I've seen all this shit. Bro,
Yeah.
I'm just an internet user like you. Tell me about it.
I mean, there was like a whole movie in the 90s based off of
Never
going
saw
to
it.
visit that face. So I think it was in the 80s or the 90s, NASA satellites took a photo of Mars's surface, and they found this peculiar face on, and that's made out of like a huge mountain. And then they went back and took another photo of it, and it looked completely different. And many people think that NASA changed the appearance of it. I think that might be a more high resolution image of it. But a lot of people have thought, oh, there's aliens on Mars because that's a face that they erected or whatever.
But also looks like, you know how like when you look in the clouds
Yeah.
and like you see a dog?
That's what NASA says. So
I might be on NASA's side for that one.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. Call me a shill.
Well, I wasn't bringing up the face. That was just the face that you saw on the Google image search, because I think the face is probably fake. But that monolith on Phobos, which is the moon, if you actually click on the image right below the face, that's the potato-shaped moon of Mars.
How big is this thing, allegedly?
Not very big. So here's the crazy part.
What's not very big? Like the size of New York City, the size of New York State? That's
Probably a
tough
large
question.
comet.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Guy thinks I know how big comets are.
it's a cop-out answer for me as well. Yeah. It took big enough to take out the dinosaurs. Let's just put it that
All
way.
right, that's good enough.
So essentially, if you look at, and this again is one of those things that ties into the existence of a potential secret space force, because that's where the Nazis apparently have a base with the reptilians, and the secret space program is on Mars.
We're going full David Icke.
We're
now,
going,
huh?
yeah. Again, if you believe that line of alternate history. Right?
No, I definitely don't. He
But-
won't be on this podcast.
I mean, this might trip you out. So when I heard about that monolith is when I started looking into it. And one of the things I noticed was that Russia is like 0 for 9 on trying to land any rovers on Mars. And the U.S. is like 13 for 14. Like, we're like
Fuck off,
Mahomes in that
Putin.
bitch, right?
Yeah.
But the crazy thing is, Russia's been trying to go there, I think, even before us. And there's always a weird reason why it fails at the last second. So a couple of the original rovers that landed on Mars were just completely not functional when they landed, right? Another one that they landed on there, I forget the name of it, but it landed and it sent back one image before dying a minute later. And the image looked like white noise from an old TV. You know, it looks just, there's nothing discernible in that image, right? And then they decided after that, hey, if we can't get on Mars, let's go for Phobos, the moon. And they named, and so this mission, basically, they created 2 different ones, Phobos 1 and Phobos 2. And they sent them both like within months of each other. That way one could be a fail-safe, right? Phobos 1 essentially crash lands into the surface and doesn't really do anything. It just crashes, right? The second one, Phobos 2, is their last chance to try to get there, right? And while it's passing Phobos and going towards Mars, something knocks it out of orbit. Something just hits it, right? Some object. And it's spinning. But while it's spinning, it's flashing pictures, like taking pictures this whole time. So you have a spinning camera that's just taking pictures nonstop, essentially, right?
Dick Cheney's waving at the camera.
2 images that came out of this, very interesting. One image has Phobos in the background, and right next to Phobos, and in between Phobos and this thing, is this long cigar white shaped object. It's just, and the measurement that they got from it was like it had to have been like something like a mile long.
Do we have this picture?
You could probably look up the picture. Yeah. Phobos to UFO, something like that. So then there's another picture that it took, and this one was taken as it was crash landing into Mars surface because it didn't have a good entry point or whatever. So that picture right here where it looks like a pointer and a white dot
Down,
right
down,
below your
right,
mouse.
Down, right.
You
No,
go left,
no.
one left one right there. That's the image. So that's Phobos in the back, and that is a mile long. And keep in mind that's also really fucking wide if that's a mile. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? So that is interesting. Another thing. So go down a little bit. Over
This one or this side?
right there, right where your cursor was, where the mouse was, right there. Another picture it took on Mars' surface, it got multiple images of this thing, is a saucer-shaped shadow of presumably what this object was. And it was also casting a large shadow of itself onto the surface of Mars that Phobos was photographing after it got knocked out of orbit by this thing, right? So, yeah, that's interesting. And so essentially, Russia, like, they put out these public images that they took. Like, look, this is the reason why we can't land on Mars. Like,
But the U.S. can.
yeah. And so there's like a famous photo of like one of the higher ups in their space program, which the Russian space program has been a joke anyways.
Right.
But one of the higher ups was like, she's famous for holding that photo that I showed you of that long white object in front of like a conference room full of reporters. There's an image of that somewhere.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that. So you did a full video on that on your channel.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, everyone, make sure you go check that out. Wow. Yeah, like once you start thinking about like colonizing other planets, we talk about it so nonchalantly in a way. You know, Elon's like, yeah, I want to colonize Mars. But like Elon is an American now, right? Like he lives in America. If he went to do it, that's a national security issue if it's just him for other countries, right? It's a national security issue for us. We got to make sure, you know, he's working with the government, I guess, or something like that. But it gets really weird because, these are things that if we lived in a utopian world, everyone should be on board with, right? Like, okay, we're all, as a world, going to go explore other planets. I would argue that outside of a handful of countries in the Soviet Union, when we landed on the moon, there was probably some jealousy that, like, the U.S. did it. But, people are like, okay, this is good for us. But if we're looking at actually being able to physically maneuver ourselves to get human beings onto another planet with the idea that we are going to populate there and create a community, it gets real weird when you put those borders up in space too. That's something I think about at night sometimes, because there's no, as far as we know, there's no precedent for that. There's no.
It's like the deep sea.
Yeah, and people worry. People worry so much about, like, the one world government and all that stuff, but does that have something to do with it? Are they trying to, like, get together so that eventually they could be together on that? Maybe. I don't know. I wish they'd find some better cast of characters to do it. People look quite suspect, to say the least. But that's something that I don't think is talked about enough.
That's interesting. I mean, there's going to be a lot of learning lessons colonizing space.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and maybe that's why a lot of people in the UFO community believe, like, some of these aliens are here to raise our consciousness and, like, help humanity. Maybe part of that is just, like, not being territorial as you explore space.
Well, and that would be the thing. Like, if you're like, hypothetically here, I don't know what to think of all that. If you're talking about one of two things, which I think would accomplish essentially the same goal, you either have aliens from a highly advanced, far advanced to us civilization from another planet who have figured out utopian interaction, or you have interdimensionality, in which case future humans are here where they figure that out then too. In either of those scenarios, that would make sense that they're trying to teach these idiot, lab rats, us, how to interact better. But it gets weird because if you stay with the interdimensionality one for a second, when I had Dr. Michikaku in here, he talks about this a lot. And, like, his theories on this, I think I might be a little biased, but I think they're very well thought out. And it's all hypothetical. We have to say that. But, because he's a theoretical physicist. But, like, he always talks about, if you looked at an interdimensional nature of, say, something as simple as time travel that we can at least concept, and we don't know if it's real or not, but he's like, if you time traveled back to Ford Theater in 1865 and made sure Abraham Lincoln didn't die, you're not changing the reality you're coming from. It creates a new river of time and a separate dimension, a world in which that action was different. That one thing was different in this world. So now, like, that's a serious event, right? Now think about, like, the butterfly effect with that, right?
Yeah.
Every little action, whether I tap the table right now or tapped it over there right now, there could be two different dimensions where that's the only difference that happened up to this point in time, and everything after that's different, which means there's infinite dimensions in that way. So to land this plane here, what I'm saying is, if you had some of these smarter beings coming back, I don't know how much incentive they would have to actually make sure we didn't destroy ourselves, because they're coming from a different dimension anyway. It's like they might just be here with the popcorn to watch. Like, yo, this is the one where all these fucking idiots blow each other up with nukes. Hey, Jeff, get a load of this, right?
Yeah.
It could be something like that,
Some
know?
Rick and Morty.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think about that sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like maybe that's what I used to think, that they're just here observing us like zoo animals. But honestly, I have no idea. Like, I personally would love for it to be real. That way I could meet one and hopefully meet the hot ones, like I said. But yeah, I don't know. I wish that we had more information and more confirmation of certain things, or, less of this, like, tribal mentality where I'm right, you're wrong, we're on different sides of the coin here, just creating drama between us,
Right. There's a guy, like, right down the street here who claims he had sex with aliens.
Really?
Yeah, he lives here. He's like 95 now.
Dang.
What's that guy's name, Alessi? Can we look that up? I forget his name. Danny Jones wants to come up. He's wanted to do a podcast with him for years.
Bro, I interviewed this girl named Stacy Wright, who's the head of the MUFON in Arizona.
Yeah.
And you know who she is?
I'm well aware of MUFON.
Okay.
Through Ron James. Who's
Got
been
it.
on the podcast.
So she's in charge of like the Arizona MUFON. And I met her because I went to a MUFON meeting in Phoenix.
Is this the guy?
What's his name? Sorry.
They're not saying
Hit more.
Maybe the image. Ralph Blue.
No. I don't think that's it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Is this guy like an actual like high profile story?
Yeah. We cut you off though. Go ahead. You were talking about Stacy from MUFON.
Yeah. When I was talking to her, like MUFON basically is what civilians report like their sightings or interactions with, and then they go out and independently investigate. But that's the dude.
That's him. He lives here.
Wow.
David Huggins. That's it. I'm sorry.
And you've
That's
met him?
twice. We've cut you off now. No, I've not met him, but Danny has been trying, just like I guess for the entertainment of it.
Yeah.
To do a podcast with him for years, and he was like, "Son of a bitch, bro! He lives like
Lost his
5 blocks from
virginity.
you."
I mean, does it count if she wasn't human? He might still be a virgin.
That's a good question.
Like, what is that his opening line with most of the chicks? Like, is that a thing that looms over him ever since?
When I was 17, I lost my virginity to
Would
a
you rather
female.
get AIDS your first time having sex, or lose your virginity to an alien?
I mean, am I dying if I lose it to an alien? Or am I really sick if I lose it to an alien? Then
I mean, if you talk to the guy in Virginia, Brazil.
well, yeah, but he didn't have sex with him. This guy's fucking a fossil. He's like 100 years old.
Does that make him a liar? Because if he had sex, wouldn't she have weird diseases that we don't know about? These are all valid questions,
It's a
right?
valid question. Yeah. Never thought about that. I guess Danny will have to ask him.
The worst part is, what if she had some technology that made him turned on even if she was repulsive, like a Shallow Hal type of example? You know what I'm saying?
God, I love podcasts like this. So much fun. We do so much serious shit in here sometimes. It's like we got.
I mean, there are human women who I don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. Now we're bringing in a whole other species, bro.
Yeah, it gets weird. But now finally, the Stacy MUFON thing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So she said that people report having sex with these, so that's why I brought it up, because you actually brought up this guy.
Yeah.
And she, when I was like, really, that's a thing? Like, her and her friend that she came with, they were like, you know how like my fiance, she'll be reading like literotica, and she'll like
Literotica?
women
Erotic
are into like
literature?
those juicy, steamy novels.
Like 50 Shades of Grey?
Yeah, that type of shit. My fiance, she said her favorite. She doesn't like me talking about her books on podcasts.
You're doing it now.
Her favorite trope is enemies to lovers. But anyways, you know how like some girls, they'll like be into like literotica shit, and they like when they talk about it, they get all like excited and stuff. Like Stacy, when she was like, yeah, people report having sex with it, and I was like, what do they say? Is it like good or is it nasty?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I swear to God, like her and her friend, they like got all like giddy, like school children. They're like, oh yeah, they say it was amazing. Yeah, exactly, bro. That's what I'm saying. That was what I was basically like, okay, yeah.
Like jumping on the washing machine, like, oh yeah, it was wild.
Yeah. Apparently the reptilians got some big dick.
Oh my God. Oh, can we go back to the pyramid? Jumping all over.
Yeah.
But we got off that because
Yeah.
I got us off at talking about the locations of other places. But the thing I wanted to ask you about, and I'll get some of it wrong if I like try to repeat the entire theory, so I won't. But essentially, Luke Cavern's argument, which he was, and I'm grateful for this, very open to being wrong about. He's like, Luke is very sober about this stuff, which I like. But he was trying to say that there is an argument that Khufu actually did build the pyramid or whatever. I know you disagree with that. But one of the things that admittedly, even for him, was like this gets weird, is how the fuck they even got the stones there. Because the stone, I don't remember the weights and whatever, but maybe you know some of that offhand. Like the stones are so big. And they had to get them from like maybe it was somewhere in the Nile, and they had to move it. I don't remember how far, but very far. Is there any real physical explanation for how that could have happened? I know we've seen the one video with the guy who claims to be able to move stones.
Yeah.
We've shown it on the podcast, but I don't. That doesn't also then affect like how they got them up high or moved them that fast across land to be able to build this within whatever it was, a 100-year period or something?
Right. Well, it's actually 20 years is what it took, supposedly.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's why I'm trying not to do numbers because I'll get it wrong.
So yeah, you're correct. The basically the stones were taken from two different places, like quarried, I think is what the term is, right? Yes. Quarried from two different places, and one of the places was where the larger stones that make up the intricate interior come from. So the stones go from 2 tons basically at the low end all the way up to 80 tons. And the larger ones are kind of what make up the intricate interior and the tunnels and whatnot. And so those larger 80-ton ones were the ones that were quarried from 500 miles south of Giza. Now people look at that and they go, well, clearly the Nile River's there. Clearly they use the Nile River to transport these 80-ton stones. But when you look at the boats that supposedly, and I'll just bring it back to Mahomes. Mahomes, the greatest quarterback ever. Even his trainer said after his dad bod pictures came out, you can't launch a cannon out of a canoe.
Well, that's a good quote.
Right?
That's a good quote.
So show me one of those old ass crickety wooden boats carrying an 80-ton stone, and then do that times how many? Yeah. There's 2.3 million stones inside the pyramid, right? So get this, 2.3 million stones going from 2 tons to 80 tons that are so precisely cut with laser precision that there's no mortar or any concrete used to hold the thing together. It's literally the joints between these stones, you can't even fit a razor blade between them. And it's withheld its structure better than any of the copycat pyramids that came hundreds, if not thousands of years later, using nothing but its own weight over the test of time, right? And these stones, for them to have built it in 20 years, which is the official narrative, because that's, an ancient Egyptian pharaoh, he's not going to have 500 years to build this thing for his tomb. Right. He's got 20 years maybe, right? So he apparently built it in 20 years. That means they had to place a stone, like 600 stones a day or something like that. God.
Those were some impressive slaves.
Impressive,
my God.
Right? I think that's like a couple stones every few seconds or something, just completely unrealistic, just from the sheer size of it. And we're not even talking about the astronomical alignments and the precision measurements of like how it's literally a scale model of the northern hemisphere of planet Earth to the ratio of 1 to 43,200. And it's perfectly accurate to within 200 to 300 feet. Randall Carlson, who's looked over all the satellite data and digested a lot of it, famously is like, now if you took 10 measurements of the measurements of the Earth, all the measurements would be different, even with satellites, and they would all differ by about 200 to 300 feet. Why is that? It's because the natural shifting forces on the Earth, from the tidal forces to the volcanic activity, it's always warping the surface of the Earth by within about 200 to 300 feet at any given point in time. So the fact that they were accurate to the scale to within 200 to 300 feet is mind-boggling. Aside from the fact that it's also more perfectly aligned to true north than even our buildings that we've tried in modern day to accurately align to true north. It's accurate to within like 3/60ths of a degree, I believe. I could go on for days.
I know. Yeah. If you change the timeline, obviously in this case where Khufu didn't build it, and maybe you go back to something like this somehow was able to survive an extinction event and came from some sort of, not necessarily like Atlantis itself, but like an Atlantean type civilization that had things figured out. It's just very hard to think about because we think about all our innovations based on the order of resources with which we were able to create things on the way to get there, right? So we think about having the iPhone, for example, through the creation of the internet and, a long time before that, the phone and around that time, electricity, right? But that doesn't mean that a pattern to get to something on a scale as impressive as the equal of what our iPhone is in some other lane wasn't done by other resources that were somehow created that we can't concept because we don't have it in our civilization within an ancient civilization. That was kind of a word salad, but does it make sense?
Yeah.
It gets weird. All this stuff gets weird, but it's fun to talk about.
Yeah, I love it.
It's I know you do. It's a lot of fun to talk about, and I'd love to get some more people in here who have diverse beliefs on what this stuff could be. It's very fun to go back and forth with the quote unquote experts.
Have you ever heard of this dude named Michael Schratt?
Stratt?
Schratt.
No, I don't think so. Can we pull him up?
Yeah, he's been on
YouTube?
a few documentaries and Ancient Aliens a few times. He's one of those guys who's done a lot of, but he's a military aerospace historian. Huh. I interviewed him a couple years back, and I was very surprised. Yeah, that's him. Actually, Stacy Wright, the Phoenix MUFON lady, she introed us together. Told me he would be a good guy to interview. So I interviewed him, and I was very surprised. If you ever watch any of his content, he has his own like documentary as well. He's studied all the high-profile UFO sightings, going from Close Encounter of the Third Kind all the way just to the first kind. And he's gone through all the files and researched, and he's of the belief, ironically, that a lot of this is secret military technology. He thinks the Phoenix Lights was a hologram. He thinks Socorro was a nuclear craft from a local base.
And he was on Ancient Aliens?
He's been on a lot of those programs, right?
They must have hated him on there.
Yeah.
They're like, yo, fuck this guy.
Yeah. So when I realized that, and he'll show you pictures and he'll tell you the incident. He has illustrations of every sighting, and you name it, like all the high profile ones you can think about.
Let's get him in here.
You should
talk to this guy. Yeah.
I haven't asked him his take on Travis Walton. I'd be very curious about that, but I've always thought it'd be a great idea to get him in here with someone like a James Fox, just as an example, because we've been talking about him.
I would love that.
Because James has gone so deep specifically on Socorro.
Yes.
And I've made a video about it because of the interview you did with him as one of the resources that I use for that. Because
cool.
I didn't realize he had gone so deep on Socorro. And when he was saying this was the case that flipped J. Allen Hynek, I was hooked, to become a believer.
Yeah, that was episode 138, I think.
So someone like him, who's also gone just as deep as many of these sightings, who thinks it's actually not aliens, I would be very curious to see what the debate between that.
Yes, I would too. I love that.
Yeah,
that's exactly what we need. Like good in person, not behind Twitter, talking out facts. Because I guess none of us know, but let's see what the evidence is. Because
now just bring me in to be a guest on the debate.
Yeah. You can fucking come here, rip your blunt, and enjoy. But you said you were having this guy on, or you had him on?
I talked to him for like 2 hours, and
I'm gonna check that out.
And then I'll send you the It's actually posted on my channel. It's why the U.S. military thinks UFOs are man-made, is like the title. And I didn't put his name in or face in the thumbnail. Okay. I probably should, but I didn't know if he had a big enough name to put his face in the thumbnail. But it's got like 19K views or something like that on my channel.
Okay. That's
the interview.
Yeah. Okay, got it.
So I did ask him towards the end. Again, if I meet someone who's skeptical, I start to see. I want to know exactly how skeptical they are on a scale of like 0 to 100.
Right.
I don't know if I phrased it exactly like that, but I basically was like, so do you believe that 0% of these are extraterrestrial? Like 100% of all of this is secret technology. Going back to the 1856 U.S. airship wave or something like that. I think I might have butchered the year, but it was in the 1800s. There was a wave, which is also interesting because he's gone through history of sightings. And kind of like the Hat Man that I told you about last night, it seems like the physical form of UFOs that are sighted tend to match the time era that they're from. The UFOs that were being seen in the 1800s looked like wooden pirate ships floating in the sky. But they were anti-gravity, just slowly hovering, and
could that also be programmed though? Could that be? I'm just taking the devil's advocate of like the alien civilization here being able to change the appearance to match what these people might believe.
Very potentially.
It's so weird.
Yeah. So he thinks that that was even maybe a secret organization that had access to high level technology. He doesn't make the leap that it's aliens, and he doesn't even make the leap of where they might have gotten this technology from. But he makes the argument that all of this is clearly man-made technology from just like rivets and seams that you might see on some of these things. Some of them have serial numbers. One of the cases I remember he specifically brought up was Socorro, New Mexico. And so that one, yeah, I've always wondered what would his conversation look like with someone who is a true believer that in a lot of these cases that it's quite the opposite, you know?
Yeah, I have to check that out. I got to watch that video that you did with him. That's really cool. Really cool. Socorro, James was saying we could do a whole podcast on that. Maybe we will, because there's so much there. It's just like, and he got a lot of data when he was making what eventually was becoming the project The Phenomenon, because some of the interviews in there were stuff he did in the 90s, and this thing came out in like 2020. And that was a case he kept coming back to because it was just so wild. But, dude, it's getting weird out there.
Yeah.
It's getting real weird out there. What's the next move with your channel? You're making that video on South America, which will probably be out when this comes out. We're filming this one a little ahead of time. Yeah. So we'll have the link to your channel in the description for everyone. But what else are you working on?
Working on the podcast that we just started like a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
That's more of a newer thing. I would still consider my main thing my YouTube channel. So that's basically it. I'm trying to pump out more content. Like my goal is more frequent posting, and I've kind of talked to you a little bit about my workflow where it's taken me, the more complex these videos have gotten, because my goal has always been longer, because some of the original ones were like 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah, you have varying lengths, which is tough on YouTube.
Yeah.
YouTube's algo has an issue with that.
So I was given the advice to try to hit 20 minutes. And it seems like a lot of my audience was craving longer videos from the comments. So I slowly worked it up to 20 minutes. And the first video that hit 20 minutes was the Sphinx. And within a month, that hit 2 million views.
Wow.
So ever since then, that's kind of become my benchmark. But that's led to me actually just like becoming a little bit too perfectionist at times, where it's like the video takes a month or two to get out. So my goal is to at least start posting once every 2 weeks this year.
All right, good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, I mean, more is, if the quality's there, and I think your quality's there, more is good on there. Obviously, we moved the cadence of this podcast up to, we're doing like 2 a week. So, you know, I think you got to stay in front of people. You got to, there's so many
shorts that you were telling me about. It's about staying in front of people.
Yeah, it's like, you know, there's so many amazing content creators out there, and there's room for everyone. But the best among them who are going to get the attention are the ones who are constantly providing value for their people. So, you know, obviously, like, you're putting your heart and soul into this, just keep going with it. And you'll get a cadence. You'll get some editors to be able to do stuff. I was telling you, like, I edited every single frame and every single thing on this podcast until the end of April 2023. And I edited almost everything on this podcast until, what was it, like November of last year. And now I started, you have to. Like, you know, we have way more going on with the actual business itself and trying to survive here and put out more content and get more people in here. And there's so much that goes into that. Like Alessi and me are packed to the gills. But the idea is like you scale it up by also now you've demonstrated you can create the content, now create more of it. So I think you'll get there, no problem, man. But once again, we'll have your link in the description and everything. I encourage people to go subscribe. This was a fun convo, bro.
Yeah, thank you.
It was a good time. Thanks for coming out from all the way out there.
Thanks for the invite.
Of course,
Getting
brother.
me out here to Jersey. Maybe I'll have to come back in the future.
Of course.
Especially if you moderate a debate between this guy and James, bro.
We'll give you a front row seat to that. That would be cool. Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.